should India manage its relationship with China, especially because of the incursions, because of salami slicing, because of the tensions that we've been having? Historically, perhaps it was different, would you say?
Uh, well, I mean, we are now defining our relationship, unfortunately, in the context of what happened first in Doklam and then Galwan. And those incidents, unfortunately, are a stark reminder of how complicated the relationship between the so-called elephant and the so-called dragon is. But I wonder, why does the relationship need to be so complex? Uh, a multitude of experts have weighed in on the issue. Some of them say that China is diverting attention from its own domestic troubles. Others say that China wishes to establish its Asian dominance and is thus prodding India, Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Australia in a multitude of ways. Yet another group believes that India is equally responsible for the mess that it finds itself in because of a lack of consistent China policy over the decades. Now, as I see it, the problem is that India sees the relationship's history only through the prism of 1950 and thereafter. That was the year in which the People's Liberation Army took over Tibet, and subsequently, of course, Aksai Chin also. And then the relationship began deteriorating. The two countries then went to war in 1962, and of course, India was hopelessly unprepared. The war lasted just a month, but almost around 1,400 Indian soldiers and about half that number of Chinese soldiers died. Thousands were wounded. Around 3,900 Indian soldiers were captured and taken prisoner by the Chinese. The 1962 war was followed by several other border skirmishes, including the 1967 clash at Nathula, which of course India decisively won. The 1987 face-off in Sumdorong-Chu, the 2017 battle for Doklam, and of course the most recent one in Galwan. Quite naturally, the mere mention of China gets India's hackles up. But China sees its foreign relationships in the context of a much older prism, and it's a much wider prism. 3,000 years ago, the Zhao monarchs believed that their empire occupied the middle of the earth. Hence, China was called Zhonggao, or Middle Kingdom, glorious empire surrounded by barbarians. So, subjugation of the barbarians was a sacred duty. Other kings would necessarily have to submit to Chinese hegemony for this construct to work. An alliance between China and India, by definition, would have to be one of master and vassal under the Middle Kingdom approach. But China's foreign policy and military maneuvers are not only based on their Middle Kingdom approach, but are also influenced by Sun Tzu, who we spoke about earlier. Sun Tzu says that all warfare is based on deception. When able, we should seem unable. When we are in action, we should seem inactive. When near, we should seem far. When far, the enemy should think we are near. So, unfortunately, as we know, China did not forget its history and its ancient wisdom. Unfortunately, somewhere along the line, India did. So, if China can look to Sun Tzu, India, of course, has Kautilya, whose strategic and economic views are no less profound. If Kautilya says that if the ends can be achieved by non-military methods, even by methods of intrigue, duplicity, and fraud, an armed conflict is not advised. Any activity which harms the progress of the enemy engaged in similar undertakings is also to be considered progress. But most importantly, Kautilya's Arthashastra emphatically says that the prosperous one becomes the victorious one. Why did we pay no heed to this fundamental truth? India's prism honestly needs to change. India's linkages with China go back centuries. Frank, I was very surprised when I was writing The Vault of Vishnu. I realized that it was a Pallava prince, Bodhidharma, who took South Indian martial arts such as Kalari Payattu and Silambam to Shaolin, thus resulting in a new technique that came to be known as Kung Fu. Similarly, Buddhism traveled from India to the White Horse Temple in Loyang and then spread not only within China, but also to the rest of the world. Chanakya's Arthashastra talks of Chinese silk that was imported into India and was highly valued. The traveler Wanzhang not only was enthralled by his stint at the world-famous Nalanda University, but he was also ecstatic to taste sugar candies that he had never experienced before. Though through the British, China gave us tea. Why did we fight wars with China for most of history? Well, the part of the reason is that the Himalayas gave us natural protection. But our economic strength historically played a vital role. In 1960, the Chinese GDP at $2010 was $128.3 billion. India's GDP in that year was $148.8 billion, significantly higher than that of China. But China overtook India in 1978 when its GDP became $293.6 billion compared to India's 293.2. So effectively, the countries had almost equal GDP by 1978. But after that, the gap between India and China only kept worsening. By 2019, China's GDP was almost around 5.5, 2021 actually, was about 5.5 times that of India. Successive governments in India thought that they could fight Chinese aggression through military or diplomatic means, completely ignoring the fact that economic imbalance would be our undoing. I have always believed, Sharan, that India is a land of thinkers, but we slip up terribly on execution. This is fundamentally what separates us from our Asian neighbors, such as Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Malaysia, that pull themselves out of destruction or poverty by simply following the philosophy of that famous shoemaker Nike, which says, just do it. I really thought that, COVID-19 and the pandemic was the perfect opportunity really for the elephant to face the dragon. So India has taken bold decisions when faced with a crisis. And this was the perfect crisis to spur bold and transformative thinking that can allow us to leapfrog and set the balance right. So everything that India needs to do in the context of China is already known to us. We don't need fancy consultants to tell us. We simply need people to get it done. Cut bureaucracy down to the bone, make tax compliance simple and easy, use out-of-the-box solutions for education and healthcare, cut the pendency of litigation, modernize the police machinery, push harder on urban infrastructure, untangle the plethora of rules and regulations that hold back entrepreneurship. And, so if you do all of that, then in effect, what you're going to achieve is a greater level of prosperity. And as Kautilya says, the prosperous one ends up becoming the victorious one. I would like to remind you that there is an old proverb which says that elephants cannot run, but science has recently determined that elephants use a trick called Groucho to reach speeds of 25 kilometers per hour. So even though their 4 feet never leave the ground simultaneously, elephants manage to bounce around their center of mass, much like an exaggerated walk. So it's time that we start getting the elephant to experiment with new ways to run. That is the only way that we can deal with China.
Absolutely. The Asian tigers are already roaring. It's probably time for us to catch up with the rest of the world. And I hope that happens with time.
The way I would like to say it is that we think that we are fighting the dragon, that is the Chinese, but the real dragons that we need to fight are within India. We need to fight all the things that are holding back the economy and make it so globally competitive that that the entire context of China falls into the background.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.